Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Toomer Talks Show. I have a question for you. Have you ever considered a GLP-1 medication like Ozempic or Wegovy or Zepbound or Mounjaro? Has your doctor told you that you have a metabolic condition that might be well controlled with this, on the verge of diabetes? Maybe you have polycystic ovary syndrome, or you're going into menopause, or you have fatty liver. If you had any of these things and you have been told that a GLP-1 medication may be right for you, you probably want to know what what they are and how they work. But we've been calling them weight loss drugs when in fact they're not really. They are drugs that fix the metabolic cause of weight gain and a lot of other things. So I'm going to talk about that tonight. And if you have any questions, make sure you write them down, get them ready, because at the end, I always answer questions that you have. And I also answer questions from my emails. So help@drtoomer.com. So if you're here, say hello. Hello, Marcia. Thank you for coming from Barbados. And let me know where you're listening from. And if you're listening later, put in #replay. And you can put your questions after the video on YouTube. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit the little bell so that you always get notified when I post videos. And that way you can always get the information that you need, which is a lot of it. And there's over 200 videos there now. So go on over and subscribe and take a look. Binge if you want. Of course, I don't mind. All right. So hello, Elizabeth from North Carolina. Thank you for joining again. I thank you guys for coming and supporting me every week. It's very nice. So like I was saying, are you someone who is wondering about GLP-1 medications? We've been hearing about all the negativity, a lot of negativity, like Ozempic face, Ozempic butt, Ozempic whatever. We hear about the horror stories that are usually from people taking the medication, not being monitored by a physician, and then allowing side effects that are not at all subtle to go on too long and they become dangerous. So I just wanted to talk about what GLP-1s are, how they help with weight loss, but what else do they do? What are they correcting really? The weight loss with GLP-1 medications like Wegovy and Zepbound, which are the weight loss versions, and Ozempic and Mounjaro, which are the diabetes versions of the same medications. The reason that they work is because they act on a metabolic condition, a chronic metabolic condition. We know diabetes. Diabetes is a chronic metabolic disease, but there are some other stages that happen before this. And I've mentioned this many times in many of my videos. You can go back and look at them. But what is it about these medications that cause weight loss? Everyone thinks they're like these magic pills or magic injections. They are weekly injections, and there is a pill version. Doesn't work as well, but there is a pill version. People think they work like magic, but they actually don't. They are acting on the reason that our body makes fat, and that's why they reverse fat production. So, but the number one thing that people look for with these GLP-1s and the thing that they report the most is appetite suppression. The appetite suppression that we see with GLP-1 and medications is actually because it works in the brain. It works in the brain so that the brain can signal the rest of the body that you've eaten. And so it stops overeating. It also stops cravings of carbohydrates. It also stops appetite. Like people who have like just voracious appetites and they take this medication, often what it does is suppresses that. Because what's happening, our appetite, when it's overactive, is actually being caused by a problem that the medications fix. It's not that you don't have control. It's not that you don't have willpower. Yes, you can probably white knuckle it over the feeling, but really what's driving it is glucose dysregulation in your brain, and these medications correct that. And that's why it leads to appetite suppression. Now, there is some decreased eating that happens because of what's called early satiety, meaning that you feel full faster. And the reason that happens is because the hormone that it mimics, glucagon, it slows down gut motility, meaning that when you eat food, it kind of sits in your stomach a little longer. And then as it passes through a little slower. And so, which actually leads to one of the side effects. I'm just going to mention things as we go along, of constipation. And if, most people who get constipation, what we do is we suggest they take magnesium citrate, and it reverses that. We usually don't like people to take laxatives. We prefer stool softeners instead of laxatives. Now, when it comes to slower gut emptying, the biggest issue many people have to think about is if they have reflux. And so it's really important that when chewing food, you chew it very, very, very well until it's liquid. So that way it passes through your stomach, and it also gets absorbed. The nutrients from that food gets absorbed better when in the intestines. So there is a way of countering that. So appetite suppression is number one. Slower gastric emptying is number two, or what we call slower gut motility. Number three, what these medications do is they improve insulin sensitivity. Now, I'm sure you've heard a lot about insulin resistance. What insulin resistance is that our body produces its own natural insulin to help us regulate blood sugars. But when that insulin can't act on the cell like it's supposed to, so that our body absorbs that blood sugar, it's called insulin resistant. The cell is resistant to the insulin our body's producing. So what happens is the sugar does not get into the cells, and therefore all the messages that the blood sugar tells the cell about what's happening, what food you've eaten, what energy you need, is all being disrupted. And so instead of getting the signal to stop eating, we get the signal to keep eating. Instead of getting the signal, make fuel, we get the signal, make fat. So insulin resistance is a problem, and that's one of the leading reasons why we have weight gain. So what these medications do is they make the cell sensitive to insulin. So when the cell is sensitive to insulin, blood sugar gets into the cell, and all that messaging, all those signals get corrected. And so the brain stops sending the message, eat more, and instead you eat less. The brain stops sending the signal that you're starving, and so that signal gets stopped. So there's just, and it apart from the food cues, there are other cues. Energy, it tells the body make fuel instead of fat, because it's getting the signal saying that you've eaten and now you need to move, and you need the energy from that food for something else. So because now the cells are sensitive to insulin, blood sugar is controlled. And so when blood sugar is controlled, the body again gets the right signals. It tells the body, make fuel, don't make fat anymore, because we have enough food in our system. We're not starving, so don't make fat. Sort of think of it like if, for example, there was a key. If you're trying to get into a house and you just can't get the door open, you don't know if the house is empty or if somebody's in it. And so the signals that the decisions that you make are based on limited information, because you can't get in to know what's going on. Once you get in the house, you can make all the right decisions, because you can see, you can look, you get all the information that you need in order to make decisions based on occupancy, based on the temperature of the house, based on how much furniture is there, based on who's there or who isn't. Well, that's the same thing our body does. When it can't open the door to our cells, that the messaging is all off, because there's no information being given so that our brain can make a decision as to what needs to happen next. And so that's what insulin sensitivity, it increases insulin sensitivity. The fifth one is it reduces the reward centers of the brain. So what that means is that the hormones that our body gives off, which is basically dopamine mostly, when we eat something that we really, really like or really want, and our brain, we get a reward feeling. We get happy because we've eaten, or because of drug use or alcohol, because food is an addiction just like all the others. So what happens is that response gets muted. So therefore, when eating, you don't get the same reward from eating, and so it doesn't make you overeat. This is also why GLP-1s are being used and being studied for addiction, for alcohol addiction, for drug addiction, for sex addiction, for really any type of addiction, and food addiction as well. And so that is one of the things that the medication does. And for those of you who are making comments and asking questions, I will come back at the end and we'll go through those. The other that I talked about already was the decrease in fat storage signals. So the brain stops telling the body to make fat when you eat, because the medication now gets all the information that the brain needs into the cell. So the brain now can make the right decisions, can make the right calls when it comes to sending signals to the rest of the body. And so one of those things is it tells the body stop making fat. But what it also does is it reverses fat production, because now that your body, your brain is sending the signal that your body needs energy, that energy stored in fat cells is now being released. So that's another thing that the medication does. The other is it changes our food preference. One of the things we crave carbohydrates and sweets or starches, which, sugar is a carbohydrate too, but we tend to crave starches and sugar when our glucose is dysregulated, or when we are insulin resistant, or when the brain does not get the right signals that we've eaten. It tells us to eat carbohydrates, to eat sugar, to eat sweet things. And so what these medications do is they stop that. A lot of the things that we attribute to willpower and discipline is actually our brain fighting against us. Our brain has a mind of its own, for lack of a better term. But that's exactly what happens. It just takes over, and it takes over based on information that's incorrect. And so it sends out the wrong signal to the rest of the body. So what that does is all of that combined changes our eating behavior. It changes how much we eat. It changes how, what we eat, what we prefer to eat, how much of that we do. And also what it will do, though, is when you use the medication, the GLP-1s, and if you overeat, you actually may get ill. It may cause a lot of nausea. And so what that does is it encourages you not to overeat anymore. The other thing that happens is if you eat a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of starches, a lot of sugar, you also feel kind of ill. And so it stops that behavior as well. So when I talk about biopsychosocial, the medications act on the biology. They also act on the psychology, in that they help with mood stabilization. They help with neurotransmitter regulation. It helps with the dopamine, like I talked about, with the reward centers. And then the social, we eat a lot of, we socialize around food. And suddenly we don't have issues with control, issues with, cravings. And so what that means is that having control around food means no overindulgence, no overeating, and making good choices. It's easier to make good choices when you're not ravenous and when you're not craving something. So Um, yeah, so basically, and I'm just going to go over a little bit of the science of it. So, um, so I already talked about how the GLP-1s act on insulin resistance. They also stop and block high insulin. So when our body gets the signal that, you know, glucose isn't getting into the cells, our body thinks, oh, well, you just need more keys to get the doors open. There's only one door. You don't need more keys. But having all those extra keys about causes problems. And in our body's case, it means fat. We make fat with all that extra. And so the medications stop that. Leptin resistance is something that we are learning more and more about. And essentially, what leptin does is it tells the body that you're full. It tells the body that you've eaten. It makes you feel full longer. And when our body's resistant to that, we don't get the signal. This is all about brain signaling. And so when our body's resistant to leptin, the hormone that our body produces when we've eaten, again, we don't get signaling. Um, One of the things that these medications also do, which is not as known as well, but we're studying it more, is that it changes what's called our gut biome. It changes the bacteria that are in our intestines. Bacteria in our intestines help with digestion. They help with absorption of food and all the nutrients. So that helps again with the signaling. And so when our gut biome is regulated, it actually acts like a second brain and sends signals to the rest of the body to let the body know what it should or shouldn't do. And but ultimately, what they do is they stop fat production and they increase fat breakdown. That is essentially why you see such extreme examples of people who lose weight. It's not because they're starving. In fact, as someone who's lost over 100 pounds, I can tell you, I eat more now than I did when I was 100 pounds heavier. It's not about the amount of food you eat. It's about what your body does with food when it's eaten, all the missignaling, all the misdirection of nutrients. And that's what GLP-1s correct. And so often what happens is the fatigue you're walking around with, the inability to sleep because of, too much weight around your neck and sleep apnea, or because of inflammation in your joints and so chronic pain, headaches, brain fog, all those things that metabolic dysregulation causes, whether overweight or not, because fatty liver happens in anybody. You don't have to be overweight to have a fatty liver, and that is very much a metabolic issue. And so it corrects all of that. So, but I know I said I was going to talk about GLP-1s and weight loss and how do they work. And I talked about a lot of other things, but essentially they don't really cause weight loss. They cause fat loss. And that's essentially the message you should get from this, is that we talk about weight a lot when in fact it's the fat that we're trying to lose, because we don't want to lose muscle. And when you lose muscle, you lose weight too. And that's not good weight loss. You just want the fat to come off. And so I see a few questions and comments. So I'm going to try and go back up to make sure that I didn't miss any. Hold on. Oh, is everyone saying hello? Hello, Karen. Karine, hello, Cindy. We said hi to Marcia. So Marcia said, I do get constipation some of the time, but I eat prunes. Yeah, fiber. Fiber is really, really good. Things that are naturally high in water. Eating, or taking magnesium citrate. Like I said, most of us need magnesium anyway, so it's not like you're using it inappropriately. It just helps. Water is what is the best anti-constipation item there is, because a lot of times, especially during the medication in and of itself can cause dehydration, but also as we break down different things in the body, our kidneys try to flush it out. And so we often lose a little bit of water or extra water when our body is flushing out different breakdown of the byproducts of the fat breakdown. Um, Hello, Denise. Thank you for joining from Pennsylvania. Let's see. Let me go down a little farther. Is it true that sipping water slowly helps get the water into the cells? No. Um, it doesn't matter how fast or slow you drink water. It really, because your body's going to absorb it regardless. It goes into your stomach first. Your stomach kind of piecemeals it out or just puts out a little bit at a time. And then and then it goes all the way through your intestines to the last part of your colon. That's where the water is absorbed. So it's already gone through. Now, one thing that sipping water does do, though, it helps with digestion. If you're chewing food really, really well and you're sipping water, what that does is it makes a combination that makes it very easy for our body to digest our food and pull the nutrients out of it. But actual water in and of itself is absorbed at the very end, right before we have a bowel movement, before food comes out as waste. Comes out as waste. So no matter how fast or slow you drink water, it won't change absorption. Now, it may change reflux and how if it comes back up, or it may cause, stomach pain, but not. That's more of an amount thing, not the pace. Why do some doctors still believe in calories in, calories out? Because we were never taught the proper thing. We were taught all of the science. We were taught all of the science of metabolism. We were taught the science of metabolic processes, but we were mostly taught it in the form of diabetes, but not all the things leading up to diabetes. One of the misconceptions we were taught in medical school was that obesity causes diabetes, when in fact we've since learned that it's the other way around. Diabetes causes obesity, or metabolic issues like diabetes cause obesity. And so therefore that's why diabetic meds work, to reverse it, because metabolic issues are the cause. And mainly that has to do with education. But a lot of us have studied, a lot of us know better. I've been using these medications now for 15 years, and they work wonderfully for correcting all sorts of metabolic issues, not just around weight. I talk about weight a lot because that's what people want to know about, and that's how they became very popular. But these medications do a whole lot more than affect weight loss. And in fact, the health benefits that they offer are usually in spite of weight loss. So even if you take the medicine and you don't lose much weight, it is still correcting a whole bunch of other stuff that is beneficial. Okay. So any more questions? So like I said, if you come, think of something later, help@drtoomer.com. I'm going to put it in the chat. So anyone, it's help@drtoomer.com. And so you can just say, I have, raise a hand or whatever. How many of you have heard really negative comments being made about GLP-1 medications? Just show of hands. If you can, if you're in a position to do that, just say yes, me, whatever, thumbs up, something, so I know you're there and listening. Or how many of you have heard someone who's mentioned that they're using a GLP-1 and someone else making a negative comment about their use of them? I'm sure you all have. Exactly. And so it's really important to understand how they work, so it helps counter a lot of the negativity. Now, there are some things that these medications are not perfect, but they are very, very safe, and they have to be used with a physician monitoring and with physician oversight. It is very easy to mismanage them and cause problems. I mean, that's just the truth of it. Thank you, Marcia. I love that you're here. I appreciate your support every week. And so it's really important that we change the narrative around the medicines. I'm not saying that everybody has to be on them, because they don't. There are other ways of correcting metabolic issues without medications, and that's going to be what I'll talk about next week. And about how, because not everybody can take the medicines. There's people who cannot, there are people who will not, and they still have metabolic issues, and there's ways of correcting them. The medications make it easier to correct metabolic issues, but it's not the only way to correct metabolic issues. And I'll talk about that next week. If I remember, I hope I do. So I'm sure I will. I'll write it down. So if you don't have any more questions right now, I'm going to let you go a little early. I try to keep this under 30 minutes if I can. It's been a perfect 26. And but if you have questions later, write to me at my email address, or leave the questions behind the videos. Any of the videos you watch, there, like I said, there's over 200. So there's lots of information in my YouTube channel. Subscribe, share it with family and friends who may have issues, who have questions, who might be being bullied by people because they're using the medication to help with their health. And so if that's the case, send them my way, and we can, kind of arm them with information so that they can defend themselves against the naysayers. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. I will see you next Tuesday for my Dr. Toomer Talks show.